All right, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of The Deep End. Real quick before we get any further in the conversation, last week Ari and I were talking about a lot of stuff that didn't directly have to do with investing, and I don't know about Ari, but afterwards I was kind of like I was kind of in my head thinking I hope the audience likes the conversation, even though it wasn't directly talking about specific stocks or investing in particular, even though it was adjacent and definitely had some application. But we were both blown away by the reception of the last episode. And so with that, I just want to quickly say thank you guys for all of the great comments and also for the great feedback as well, because it's really good for us to know that you guys are into some of that stuff as well. But anyway, I just wanted to say that real quick. Moving on, Ari and I, before hitting record on this, we were talking about, we just started talking as we usually do, and we got into, we just kind of started talking about investing and investing strategies as we do. And it was one of those things where we stopped and we're like, hold on a second, should we start recording so we can like put this out there? And so yeah, we hit the pause button on that conversation, and now we just wanted to pick it back up now with you guys. So Ari, I think where we left off, man, we were kind of talking about just kind of the whole dividend growth spectrum, right? And you were about to say something, so I'll pass it over to you, and maybe you can launch us from here.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to double down, Ryne, on what you shared, which was a little thank you to everybody out there. Because as everybody knows, there's no script, there's no plan. This is literally the most Seinfeld-esque type of podcast on finance you could possibly find. And what comes out, comes out. And I guess that's what makes it literally the deep end, and it can go anywhere. But just knowing that all of you are out there and enjoying, listening in almost as if you're flies on the wall for Ryne and I as we really hash things out, and just go in the deep end with our thoughts. It's just really amazing to see all the comments that come in and the questions. So I also want to extend a thank you to all of you. But with that, it's where was I? I was just before we hit record. And by the way, it's always funny because Ryne and I jump on and we start talking about something, and then right away, either Ryne or myself goes, "Wait. Should we record now?" And we're like, "Yeah, we should." So we were just talking about essentially how I have over the years trimmed down from a 40 plus position portfolio. And then, now I'm working with really seven stocks in my portfolio, which was the goal that I had all along. And I was kind of sharing how it's getting harder for me on YouTube to kind of share this excitement in the dividend investing space with only 7 stocks. But not only that, these 7 dividend stocks are not necessarily the dividend stocks that you would think of as like the go-to dividend stocks. Why? Because I've become really gung-ho about the investor's profile. So my profile, just being a 30-year-old investor with a long timeline ahead of me, time to spare, more time to risk, and not even that dividend stocks are risky, but just more time to spare, and I want to sit on lower dividend yielding stocks with higher growth. So over the long term, I really don't have to worry much. Now, from what I've seen, it's like doesn't bring in a lot of excitement. So I was kind of venting to Ryne a little bit of like my frustration. Here's the point that I wanted to make is like, I really want every investor out there to see something that's, I think, probably the most important thing that any investor can recognize, which is that you need to invest according to where you are in your life and your goal. And I know Ryne and I talk about this all the time, but like if you are in your 20s or 30s or 40s, the time is now to orient yourself towards lower yielding dividend stocks. And that might not sound as sexy. I'll use that word. It might not sound as sexy, if you will, to invest in these stocks because a lot of people get started for passive income and let me collect the dividend paychecks. But my frustration comes in with like, my portfolio just hit $242,000 That makes me $58,000 and something change away from my goal of $300,000, which is incredibly exciting for me. And when I kind of think about it all, and people out there are more like, oh, but look at this guy. He's not really investing in dividend yielding stocks because these yields are too small. I'm coming back at everybody and saying like, no, the whole deal about investing is double down on the stocks that are going to get you where you want to go according to your profile. And over time, you will all see as I literally grow older, my portfolio will again change. And that's kind of the main point that I wanted to just come into this conversation with, what I was going to drop and share with Ryne. But I'm throwing that out there now, Ryne, to you. And what are your thoughts on that? Because, and I know we talked about this even the other week, I think, man, if you reoriented yourself, I think you would already be over $100,000.
Maybe. Here's my thought. We both have the goal to someday live off of this passive income. Not only just you and me, everyone here watching does. Um, from the sounds of it, I think your time horizon with this is considerably longer than mine, though. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I would guess that you are thinking kind of more of a traditional retirement timeline, right? Like, are you thinking mid 50s to mid 60s, somewhere in that range?
I guess that's also a good point. So I first of all, I have multiple streams of income, and I'll just be transparent with everybody. Like YouTube is not my main stream of income. Um, Not even, the my I don't want to say day job is the mainstream of income. I went, I left tip ranks and then I went full time on YouTube. What, Ron, for like 90 days, maybe like 4 months, and I got picked up by. I told Ron I was like, I'm going full time on YouTube, and then I got this amazing opportunity with a team that I really love for this, for this financial firm, and it was it was hard to pass up because it was just the team was amazing, and I think the suite of products are amazing, and I love to build with others. So I have that. I have YouTube, and then on top of that, I have another element of or another stream of income that comes in through personal coaching. So I have all these things going on, and then the longer term goal is even real estate in there. So I'm not really worried too much about retirement at all. Um, and I don't see myself as the person who's going to live off of dividends and retire by 45 or 50. I just see myself continuing to work and never really think about retirement in the first place. So
Hmm.
I don't know where you stand on that. I mean, are you looking to actually retire early?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat in the sense that I think I'll have projects like this YouTube channel and everything that comes along with it for the rest of my life. Because, like you, I'm a busybody. I like to stay busy and I like to have projects. I think that everyone should have something that they can pour themselves into, especially as you get older. I think that that will actually help with the longevity of your life more so than just sitting around watching TV in retirement and old age. But my goal is to, by the time I'm in my mid 40s, start drawing some of my dividends, not all of them. I don't think I ever want to get to a point where I'm drawing all of my dividends to use to pay my bills because I want to keep reinvesting and feeding that. But yeah, I have a goal by the time I'm in my mid 40s, somewhere between like 43 and 47, just depending on how much I can contribute and how well things do. There's obviously a lot of variables to play into that. But sometime in that time frame, I'd like to start pulling some of my dividends. And if things keep growing like they have been with my current rate of contributions, which I'm actively working to continue to increase over time, I should by that age be at a point where my portfolio is and the dividends I can pull, not really counting my Roth IRA because for obvious reasons I can't touch that till I'm about 60, and I max that out every single year too, or starting to now. Um, but at that point, when I'm in my mid 40s, I should be bringing in about $2,000 on average every month in dividends, just at the current rate that I'm going with my current dividend stats. And this may change down the road, but my mindset right now is that when I get to that point where I'm bringing in couple grand every month on average. I'd like to start taking some of that. I'd like to start using some of that to pay my bills. If for no other reason, just to take some of the, the pressure off my family at that time in paying these bills. And I think that that would be a good way to slowly transition into using more of my dividends. Like, for example, if I'm bringing in 2K per month on average, maybe I pull 1,000, and start using that to pay some of our bills. I don't know what our living situation is going to look like, but at this point, that 1,000 right now, and we have a fixed mortgage or a fixed interest rate, so that's not going to change. But hypothetically, if we just stayed in this living situation, like that's going to pay for more than half of our mortgage. That's huge. And so, yeah, that's kind of my goal, is to, by the time I'm around that age, start pulling some of my dividends, let it continue to grow, reinvest the other half or whatever, and let that thing keep growing. And then, hopefully that will just help kind of cruise, help us cruise from there. I don't think that's the right way. Cruise isn't the right verbiage, but I think you guys know what I mean. I just think it'll make life a bit easier at that time. And maybe at that point, that could be the thing that allows my wife to stop working if she wanted to, or maybe she could go work optional. I'm not as concerned about it because I love this, and I'm going to do this in some capacity for the rest of my life. But that's kind of the goal. That's kind of the goal right now as it stands. And I think taking this approach will allow me to reach that goal while still at the same time allow me to continue growing the portfolio and growing the passive income. So I think, just going back to kind of my general theme as it pertains to my portfolio, which is balance, I think that it will really offer that. And in the long run, that's really what I'm after, is just having that balance. And I like having that option to be able to take those dividends at that time if I want to. And that's one thing I get asked about a lot, is like, why don't you have REITs like Realty Income or Vici Properties or whatever in your Roth IRA? Because they're taxed as ordinary income. You have to pay the higher tax rate. And the reason for that is to have the flexibility and the optionality to use those dividends whenever I should decide. I don't know what life is going to bring, but I like having the option to pull that money if I need to. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, 100%. I think what's super important to understand, or the big takeaway from something that you shared, first of all, living off of dividends, I think we all have to understand what that means. And even you said it, where you're like, I'm going to be bringing in about $2,000, every month from dividend income. The first question that came to mind was like, is that going to be enough to live off of for you? And I think that's something that's so important for all of us to think about, is how much is enough? How much in dividend income are we actually going to need to retire on early, if that's what we're gunning for? Because you got to factor in, like, the grocery expenses, gas, for your car, utilities, everything, the mortgage or rent, whatever it is, your living expenses. And then my question is like, you guys are really living frugally, man.
Yeah, but it's
on
not difficult.
2,000.
This is just naturally how we're living. Like, I've talked about this before, but the way that we live our life doesn't really require a large amount of expenditures. You know what I'm saying? We don't really do a whole lot of shopping. Every once in a while, we'll go to Starbucks or Chipotle or stuff like that. But that's like as crazy as it gets over here. Our hobbies and the way that we spend our time, both my wife and myself, are put towards things that don't really require a lot of money. We like working out. My wife's actually at the gym right now. That our gym membership's $20 a month for the both of us. So that's not a huge amount of money. It's called EOS Fitness. There's a ton of them here in Vegas. I think they're kind of spread across the country as well. And I could be wrong, but I think it's owned by the same company that owns Gold's Gym.
Okay.
I think they're all kind of one and the same. I could be mistaken on that. You guys will have to let me know in the comments if you're familiar about that. But the gist of it is, we just don't do things that require us to spend a lot of money. And the times that we do spend money, it's like if we go out to dinner or something like that, it's fine because we don't do that 3-4 times a week. It's like a special thing, and we'll do it every once in a while, and that's good enough for us. We're happy doing the things that we're doing, and fortunately it doesn't require a whole lot of money.
Sure. No, it's always so important, because if you want to get to the point that you're going to retire on dividends, I think you have to take away something that Ryan just shared, which was like you got to then live frugally in order to do that in certain circumstances. And knowing that Ryan's lifestyle is already quite frugal, and they find the joy, I want to say the real wealth and riches of life without spending money. That is, I think, the real goal. But for many people, I mean, they're spending money left and right. So always just be sure that when you're looking into the future and forecasting your dividend income and how much you're going to need, like really look into the future. What type of house do you want to live in? Is that house going to be paid off? Your expenditures in terms of groceries. Do you want to take vacations? Like, what exactly do you want your life to look like at the time of retirement? I think
Yeah.
what's always been interesting for me is like like, yeah, of course I've thought about retirement, but I never really think about retirement in terms of like I'm gonna be withdrawing. I just see myself always, making money. I
Yeah.
love, but I don't. As we always talk about, it's none of the stuff that we're doing. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we both agreed on this before. Is like we don't find it to be work, so we're just getting paid to do things we already like.
Yeah.
It doesn't get better than that.
That's the secret, dude. I mean, going back to what I was saying, the things that we spend our time doing don't require a lot of money. It's because we have something like it's for me personally, you too. It's because we have something like this that gives us that fulfillment. And we've talked about this before, but when you have something like this that gets you out of bed every day and you're excited about and you can work towards, you just the want to buy stuff doesn't, it just kind of dissolves. It's not interesting. What's interesting is furthering this and doing more of this. You get so much fulfillment from doing this. Not only seeing the progress that you're making in your portfolio, the progress that you're making on your channel or newsletter, but also just connecting with the people that we do and hopefully like having a positive impact. That's a very rewarding and fulfilling thing. And when you have something like that in your life, it's like I said, it just things don't seem to matter as much. You can find fulfillment elsewhere, and I think everyone has something like that. It might not be a YouTube channel or talking about investing, but I think that everyone has something like that that they could um, pursue for themselves, and I would implore everyone to figure out what that is.
Even if you try and fail, this just reminds me of the latest guest that I had on Masters of the Market. I don't know if you saw it, Ryan, but it was this guy Juan Lewis. Which shout out to him. He's been watching all of our episodes too, and
Nice.
he is a huge fan he's like, I always get a laugh from you and Ryan and everything that's shared. And anyways, great guy, amazing guy. Shout out to you, Juan, if you're listening to this one now. But he opened up about his story about how he essentially moved to Canada and he started his own business in Canada. He was working in construction, then started his own business, didn't really know what he was doing, put all of his money into this business, totally flopped, and then got a really late start to investing. Now, I had him on because I was so curious to know from his perspective, first of all, starting late in the game. He's got about 20 years until he's going to retire, which sounds like a lot of time, maybe for some of you, but guaranteed as gain more life experience, you realize years go by in flashes, at least it feels, and it's really not that much time. That's why time is always of the essence. But not to get sidetracked with his story, he was just saying like he started late in the game and now he's all in on like growth ETFs right now. And I was
Hmm.
curious to have him on because I was saying like, man, like this, you're almost still playing it a little bit dangerous. Not investing more in dividend stocks or more of the value stocks right now because he's going so much in growth. To his point, he was like, I messed up, so I need to play a game of catch up. I want to ask you what you think of that, Ryan, because when I was on Masters with him, I see where he's coming from. But also, I was like, man, I would hate to just see something happen in the economy or the market tanks and the older you get, you just don't have that time to be as risky.
Yeah, I call something like this and maybe it's an exaggeration, but it's almost like a Hail Mary approach if you think to playing like Madden or something like that. I remember playing that growing up. Like the one play was always a Hail Mary. One of my actually my little brother, when I used to play him, that's literally the only play he would make. And my mind kind of goes back to that because it's an attempt to make up a lot of ground in like one foul swoop or not a lot of time. And I think when it comes to investing, sometimes that can work out. We've seen certain stocks just really go crazy, and so it's easy to think that growth will always offer that. But to your point, it may very well not. And if you put yourself in that position and the outcome is not what you were expecting, you're actually going to be in a worse position than if you were to just take a more I don't want to say less risky, a less volatile and a more well balanced approach. So the gist of it is though, like there's no shortcuts there. You shouldn't take Hail Marys. You shouldn't make Hail Mary plays or try and pull rabbits out of a hat if you when it comes to your financial future. There's no shortcuts either. And so really the only way to make up for that lost time, it's not by reaching for growth and reaching for returns. The only way to really do it and do it right, I think, is to be aggressive with your contributions. That's the only way to make up for that. That's the right way, I should say, to make up for that lost time. You can try the Hail Mary, and sometimes the wide receiver is going to catch it and you'll end up in the end zone, but it's risky. The chances of that happening are slimmer than they are abundant. And so, yeah, I would rethink that. I would be more aggressive with your contributions instead, and maybe do something that's a bit less volatile and is a bit more preserving of your money, while still offering some some suitable returns. But I don't think anyone at any age should reach for returns. It's easy to think that that's going to work because recently that's what we've seen in the market. It's only been good, but things can just as easily go south.
Well, it's also like always what we hear. Like there's such an unfortunate reality, whether it's on YouTube or like, CNBC, like Kramer yelling into the camera, like, oh, look at all these stocks on the run up. And I think what we have to understand is a lot of the time, most of the time, when stocks are beaten down, no one's talking about them. So you're really only hearing about, these success stories of the Hail Marys. And then you're like, okay, like when stocks are in the red, you're not really hearing about them. So your mind goes to like, oh, this must be a very successful strategy, which is also very dangerous because now it's you have a misconception about how the market really works and how it can work in your favor, because it really does all come down to the good old days, right? Buy low and I'm going to say hold high, but don't sell, don't like unless you need to. Panic sell and freak out. Just buy low, buy during the red periods, and just sit. Look for the stock. That's why I always use macros to my advantage to say like, okay, there's wars around the world. How is that going to impact certain sectors? How is that going to make an impact, on, Trump is coming into office in 5 days. How might that impact the market and policies in certain sectors that they might tank for a couple of weeks that I'll be able then to capitalize on, knowing that over the span of time, they're probably going to be okay. Again, don't time the market and like wait for events to happen. But as life is happening, because it's happening every day, just pay attention. And then realize what's also interesting is like when you're listening to the Kramers of the world, or even me and Ryne, like when you're listening to us, just pick up on the stocks that we're mentioning and then take a look at what's going on when we're mentioning them. Chances are guys like me and Ryne are mentioning stocks that are in the red right now because they're going to be on the run up later, versus the Kramers of the world are talking about the stocks in the green right now, which very well might be in the red later on. So it's just interesting to watch,
It's interesting, dude, and we get an extra, as people who put out videos on this stuff, we get an extra dimension to that. I don't know about you, Ari, but I get comments a lot, especially when I put out videos talking about, 3 deeply discounted stocks or whatever. Or I just put out a video today on stocks that are at their 52-week lows. I'll get comments pretty regularly from people who are saying, why would you buy these losers? These stocks just went down. Why would you buy these? Why wouldn't you buy Nvidia that's up X% in the last year? Or you know what I'm saying? So I'll get comments like that too, and it's just always it's always an interesting example of how people think about stocks and people think about the market. It's just always an interesting reminder. It's anyway. I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, look, I had a colleague when I used to work at my old company, which was a finance company in and of itself. And this person was very high up in the editing department, and it was just funny because like we would chat, and a stock would be on the run up, and this person would run into my office and be like, "What do you think? Should I buy it?" And I'm like, I mean, if you were gonna buy it, it probably was a couple of weeks ago when it was in the red. Like that's the time. But no one wants to invest when a stock is in the red because it's in the red. But that is in fact the time. That's it. And it comes down to like again, what are you investing for? Are you investing for the dopamine hit of a run up or to cash out immediately, or are you an investor? That means like look 5 years out. I remember
Mm-hmm.
actually sitting with this particular individual when Meta was like tanked years back. I think like 2 years ago, whatever that was. And this person was like, "Should I buy it?" I was like, "Now's the time." It's now if you want to buy it, this thing is you got to give it time. Now, this person did not end up buying Meta, but she, later comes back to my office and she goes, "Wow, I should have bought Meta." And I'm like, "Yeah, the time is not when it's in the green." And even that, whether that's a dividend paying stock or a growth stock, whatever type of investment, even an ETF, my rule of thumb is buy on red days. If I look at my Apple, stocks on my phone and it's all red, I'm like, "Oh yeah." I'm at least buying VU today. At least. But every time I see red, I mean it's a holiday for me.
Yeah, yeah. It's so funny. It's just it reminds you that there's so much of this stuff that's driven by psychology and the way that we think about things and our emotions. It's just it really plays a big role in how we approach this investing stuff. And for any new investor, that's kind of why I think it's important to read books. There's a lot of really great books on the psychology of investing and how to think about the markets. And I think that overcoming some of these psychological headwinds that are just hardwired into us, I think overcoming those starts with at least being aware of them, and the only way to become aware of them is to read about them, I think. And there's a few good books out there. I'll recommend a couple real quick. Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke is a great one. um, I think The Psychology of Money is another good one as
It's a
well for
great
that.
one.
I would say Thinking Fast and Slow, which is a like an iconic investing book,
Really?
but yeah, that one's at least for me, it was not the most interesting read. There was some important information in there, but I didn't really enjoy it. Um, I know there's a big one that I'm missing here. I don't
I think
know.
thinking fast and slow will actually help a lot of people with the psychology of just slowing themselves down enough to realize that what you see is not always actually the real picture.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of signals given to us by the market, share price performance being one of them, kind of like we were just describing. And also dividend yields, I think, also are another signal given to us by the market. And oftentimes, like our interpretation of those things is not always the reality of the situation. We've talked a lot about the share price side of things, but as it pertains to the dividend yield, think about something like think about something like a QDTE, one of the new weekly covered call ETFs. Now that fund is throwing off a couple of signals that the unknowing investor might look at and think that this is a screaming buy. It's got like a 33% dividend yield so far. And it pays out a dividend on a weekly basis. Now, just those two attributes right there to the unknowing investor would be very attractive, and those could be signals that suggest I should buy this. Why wouldn't I? It's obvious. It's, I'm getting a 33% cash flow return on my investment, and I'm getting a paycheck every single week. Heck yeah, sign me up. What could go wrong? But those signals really are misleading. At least I think those funds are so new that we'll see what happens. But my prediction is that the yield will not be sustainable. Generally speaking, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And if it's not too good to be true, why would anyone pass up a 33% cash flow return on their investment, which ties to total return, right? So there's got to be some catch to that. So anyway, that's a very misleading signal that you as an investor need to look at and think about real quick, like, okay, what is attracting me to this thing? Why am I attracted to this particular fund? The yield, the payment frequency, but do those mean that it's going to be a good long-term investment? No. When it comes to funds like that, in my opinion, those are just marketing gimmicks designed to get you to buy into those funds. Which really those funds exist as, once again, in my opinion, a transfer of wealth between you as the owner of the fund and the company that created it. They get paid those fees every time the more that people own those funds, the more that they get paid. And so they need to create these attributes like the payment frequency or the high yield to make these attractive enough that people would want to own them. But once again, closing the book on this, that's how certain attributes like a dividend yield or a payment frequency can be very misleading signals that you need to be careful of.
I think I can sum everything up in what you shared by actually what you said, which was, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is.
Mm.
And how often do we just forget about that? Like how many times do we have to go through that lesson before you're like, oh, right? Like it can take an investor out so many times.
Yeah, it's certainly a lesson that we have to learn the hard way. And I think this kind of ties back into the gentleman that we were talking about a few moments ago who maybe feels like he needs to play catch up. I think that can be the case for not all investors who buy funds like that with the high yields, but I do think that there's a certain subset of them that buy into those high yielding funds thinking that, hey, I started super late, so I need to buy something with a higher yield today that's going to help me make up for that lost time because I didn't start earlier. And so I think that there's a certain percentage of people that buy into those things because they think it's going to help them play catch up. But like I said, there's no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts to this. Buying something with a 33% yield or like a TSLY whose yield is just don't even get me started on that one. It's not the way to go. And this is coming from someone who's all about like living off of dividends and generating as much passive income as possible. But there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. And this principle applies to anything. The shortcut is always going to be the wrong, unsustainable way to do it. The right way is always going to be the right way. And the right way is not the way that you want to take. It is the more grueling, long-term way. And you can't fake that. You can't avoid that. If you want to build a sustainable passive income stream, you have to do it the hard way and the long way.
It's just like that classic story when that boy is walking on a path and he sees the old man sitting on a bench and he asks for directions to the town, and the man says, well, there's two paths that you can take. There's the long short way and the short long way, and he points in these two different directions. And what the boy hears, really is the short long way. Great. And so he runs down that path and eventually he hits this massive wall, this massive fence. And he's like, well, wait, there's this fence here. And so it turns out that short, long way ends up making him turn back around, reroutes to the old man. And then he goes down, right, what appeared to be the long way, but was actually the short way. And so I always have that in mind because I'm just like what you shared. There's no shortcuts in life. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Trying to get a pay raise, there's no shortcuts. You got to work hard. trying to invest and make a lot of money, there's no shortcuts. You're just not going to find shortcuts in life. And when you find them, I'd be really careful walking down that road because something somewhere is probably missed. You missed something. And it always comes back to get you, and it usually comes back at the worst possible time. Like, again, you think you're so close to that city, and actually you hit the fence, and then there's no way you get to that city. Versus just going that way that appears to be much longer, but it's actually much shorter because it's the right way. And it's impossible. I feel like we could talk about this. I mean, I feel like we have even in other deep end chats, but we talk about this until we're blue and red in the face. And I feel like people are still going to be listening to this and be like, I remember when Ryan and Ari were talking about this, but TSLY, like it was looking great.
Yeah.
And I also just got to say, by the way, as someone who works in the industry of, advertising and marketing and sale, the whole thing, just something to think about. And I'll even, just so everybody can really grasp this, I want you to think about like the corner store in your neighborhood or in your town. Why is it placed where it's placed? Then you walk into the corner store. Why are certain things placed where they're placed at that store? Right? Why isn't cat litter placed by the register? You got to think about all of these things because marketers are really good with psychology. And marketers are all over the financial industry, playing off of your fears and playing off of every little thing that you want. The only reason we have weekly income producing ETFs is because we heard you. We know what you want. We're going to sell that to you. But that's going to cost you.
Yeah. Very well said, man. So you gotta watch out for those guys. And the thing about these funds is that they disappear just as quickly as they arrive.
Because there's a new trend.
There's a new trend.
Everybody tells us what they want to hear. What they want. Oh, okay. It's sad, but look, I'm just gonna say this: if we all collectively got wiser, this game wouldn't be played. But if you want to, run through life looking for the shortcuts, there's always going to be that wise old man sitting on that bench. You just got to find the wise old man to direct you.
Well, it's rooted in human nature, man. People always want what they want, and they want it as fast as they can. And so that's why the shortcut or the high yield is always so enticing. It's just something that's hardwired in us, but you have to fight against that and know that if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. And I think subconsciously or even in your intuition, you can look at a lot of these things and know that there's probably more to the story than what's being led on. And I think that you should really listen to that. And in that instance, it's not going to steer you in the right direction. It's not going to push you in the direction that you necessarily want to go, because I get it. Like you want that high yield, and you want so bad for it to be the one time that it's not too good to be true. But I'm sorry, this is just not the one. This is just not the instance. So, and unfortunately, it's a lesson you have to learn the hard way sometimes.
It's the people always playing the lottery. It's like, if you just invested that money, you would hit the lottery.
Yeah.
In a different way. You'd hit the lottery, but everybody wants that one ticket.
That's a great analogy, actually. Very great analogy. And the thing about the lottery, too, is like your return might only, the money that you win, it's only going to be like 50% because you have to give up half of it in taxes anyway. So you're better off investing.
Talking about marketing, for those listeners out there who are from the East Coast, I don't know if this was ever on the West Coast. It was the New York Lottery. They had this info ad. Let me know in the comments if you remember this, anybody from the East Coast or specifically from Manhattan. But there was a commercial that would just play for the New York Lottery. And it would be it was like can't call him like a leprechaun, but like it looked like a leprechaun, like a little guy, and he would be like, "Ah, the New York lottery. That's all you need is a little bit of luck." And that's stuck in a lot of people's heads. That's all you need is a little bit of luck. And I'm like, when you really think about that message, when you play the lottery, I mean, Manhattan or New York City itself, 8.5 million people, population there, you don't need a little bit of luck. I mean, you need a lot of luck, you know? Like, but just that psychology, that gets in your head enough. Oh, it's all I need, a little bit of luck. Let me buy another ticket. A little bit of luck, another ticket. And it's just crazy what, if you're not paying attention. So yeah, maybe Ryan, Thinking Fast and Slow is a great book for everybody.
Yeah, I think so. It's worth a shot for sure. And there's similar books, like I said, Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke is a great one. I think What I Learned About Investing from Darwin kind of touches on a lot of this stuff as well. So I'd recommend that. Um, Investing, The Last Liberal Art, great. And then really anything like Morgan Housel, Psychology of Money, same as ever. I think those are both worthwhile reads too. And a lot of them touch on these similar topics. Um, but actually, kind of on this subject, Ari, we got a question in our last video from Dunder Lee on this exact kind of topic. He wanted to know that he's starting to get in the game, starting to get more into investing, and is looking for some good book recommendations. I've thrown out a couple. I can certainly throw out a few more, but do you have any good book recommendations for our friend Dunder here?
Before I answer, how old is he? Is he younger? Is he older? Does he have, I mean, do we have any other more information about him?
No, just that he's enjoying our conversations and is starting to get into investing. So just generally brand new investor.
Well, I'm happy he's enjoying the conversations. I think the first book I'd always recommend to someone that's just getting started, Psychology of Money. I just think that's it's a classic. It's a great book. It's easy, very easy to read. And I'm blanking on the name of it, Ryan, but actually I got this book idea from you. It was with all of the hedge fund managers.
Richer, Wiser, Happier?
Yes, Richer, Wiser, Happier. By the way, my dog actually ate that book.
Oh, delicious.
I had that book like all noted and like highlight. That's when I read books, I like note, highlight, annotate, post-it note. And I went on a business meeting, and I came back, and the book was just in the middle of the room, like completely devoured. I was like, "Is that my future? Richer, Wiser, Happier?" You know. Um, but that was a really great read, just for the sole purpose of like. I think what's important for a lot of retail investors, the average Joes, to get as close as we can to the professionals, because once you get into the sphere of like how these professionals are thinking and what they're investing into, you can learn a lot from them. And they're not the ones buying the TSLYs ever. They're the ones buying the S&P forever. They're the ones buying the good stable, big blue chip stocks but they're telling you to invest in everything else. So Richer, Wiser, Happier is a really good read to, I think, introduce yourself to some Wall Street professionals. And I'm not talking about like Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, like all the names that we know. And you also learn from that all these professionals are pretty in sync with how they all think and invest, which is also very interesting. So think like a professional, introduce yourself to them and read about them. And then The Psychology of Money. I think those are two great starter books that I would just start there.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely put those at the top of my list. I think if you're someone who's interested in learning how to research individual companies, I actually think this is probably a good one to pick up either way, even if you're just an ETF investor, but it's Warren Buffett in the Interpretation of Financial Statements. I would put that up there right with those other two as being like all three of those being the first books to read if you're someone just getting into investing and finance and stuff like that. This book that I'm talking about, it's by David Clark and Mary Buffett. I think Mary was like Warren's ex-daughter-in-law or something like that. I don't quite remember the relation, but it's something like that. But basically, this book goes line item by item through all three of the financial statements: the income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement. And it breaks down what each item is: the revenue, the cost of goods sold, the gross profit, the operating expenses, total debt, net debt, operating cash flow. It goes through all of these different metrics and explains what each one is, how to look at it, and how to use it when researching companies. It's a good primer on accounting even. And I actually, I took accounting in college, like a semester, and I was a lot younger and dumber then too, though. So maybe this is part of it, but I got so much more out of reading that book. It just broke it down so much more simple than I got in an actual accounting class. And I still refer to it quite often. I haven't been good about it lately, but it's one of those where you can, like, each chapter is a page or 2 pages max. So you can just, take 5 minutes a day and just continue going through the book, read a page, read a page, read a page. Once you finish, start it over from scratch. And it just keeps you in the loop of, and keeps all of that information fresh in your head. So I'd recommend that one as well.
Right. I'm curious to know, like, your all-time favorite book. Maybe it's not even a financial book, but like a book that may have shaped your perspective. At the end of the day, like, all in, like, this is also something I've taken away, by the way, from Richer, Wiser, Happier. It's like, work on refinement and you will become a better investor. So even a book that has just helped refine you has helped you become a better investor. What's been like your top read?
This is such a great question, and I want to hear yours too. But so mine's not my favorite book of all time. It's not an investing book. It's The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. And I don't know if you're familiar with this book or familiar with her work, but essentially this book, and I'll try and explain it as best as I can, because it can I think it gets kind of complex, but at the root of it for me, it's about a character. It's about architecture. The main character is an architect, and the whole setting is in the architecture world and all the people involved in it in this fictional world. But throughout this guy's entire career, from the time that he was even in architecture school, which he got kicked out of, people were always trying to tell him how to be, how to do things, how to design buildings. They basically were trying to fit him into this box of the conventional way of architecture at that time. And he resisted the entire way through school, which ended up getting him kicked out of school, all the way through his career. This guy, up until kind of towards the end of the book, was just very, very unsuccessful because he was unwilling to be put in this box and unwilling to conform to how people wanted him to do things. He was determined to forge his own path and do things his way and in his style. And people didn't like him for it. They didn't want to work with him because he was difficult and unwilling to bend on what he thought was right and on his way of doing things, which maybe that in real life and practical life, that rigidity may not be always the best approach. But the moral of the story is this guy had a certain style and a way of doing things. He was his own guy with his own unique style that no one else had, and people hated him for it. They tried to make him just like everybody else, and he was so unwilling that it cost him his career up until the very end, where, and kind of while all this is going on, his kind of arch nemesis in the book is this guy who's the complete opposite. Very conventional, like fits the mold of that box perfectly and is willing to become whoever people wanted him to be. And that led to a very successful career for him. Now, in the background of this, what's interesting is that the main character was actually designing a lot of the buildings for this other guy. The main character is a very talented architect, knew what he was doing. The other guy was just kind of a fraud, didn't really know a lot about architecture, but he talked a good talk. And the work that he presented was not his own. It was actually the work of the main character. But people loved him for it. They loved the work because it was his. They loved him because he would kind of just be whoever they wanted him to be. And so anyway, their careers were totally opposite because of these just difference in character. And at the end, it kind of switched. It turns out that this guy who had no backbone and no originality, he ended up, in the end, um, not turning out pretty well, not turning out very well. And the guy who stuck to his guns and did things his way, through and through, and was very true to self, because he stuck with that, it ended up working out in the long run for him. In the short term, it was very difficult, but in the long run, he was better off for it. And so that book, I would say that that book has. I've read it a couple times. I first read it in high school. I've read it two or three more times since then, and I would say that it shaped me in a big way. And the things that I learned from that, I certainly carry into my channel in the way that I live life. And this kind of ties into some of the themes that we talk about here, or we have talked about, especially in our last episode, which, once again, I'm so excited to hear that that was a lot of people's favorites. But one of the big conversations in our last episode was around that, forging your own path, following your interest, and just kind of living life on your own terms. And that's something that I've always tried to do. I think that was one of the big catalysts for wanting to start this channel, and also wanting to start investing as well, because it gives you the freedom to do so. But I was certainly inspired by that book in a big way. That book has definitely shaped me in a big way.
Sounds like a really interesting read. As you were sharing about it, and it's funny that you even mentioned it at the end of your remarks, but you were like, it's helped me shape my channel. And it just made me think it, like, as you were talking, I was like, man, this sounds like Ryne. It's like this guy who's like just doing his own thing, doesn't care what other people think. And yeah, I mean, I'm going to add that one to my list, man. Thank you.
I think you'd really like it, man. I think a lot of you guys would like it as well. It's kind of a long read. I think it's maybe somewhere between 700 and 800 pages, but it's really worth it, and I think it'll really light a fire under your butt. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there was something more I was gonna say on that. But oh no, there's another kind of quote that I've heard that goes along with that. I don't know if it's an actual quote, because I heard it from a TV show, but the quote was credited to Bob Dylan, and the quote says, "All I can do is be me, whoever that is." And it's true. At the end of the day, like that's all I can do is just be myself, and in life, I want to lean into that as much as I can, and have the freedom to do so too. I think a lot of people don't. The world tries to put us in a box, and the world tries to make us a certain way and push us down a certain path. But and I don't want to do that. I want to do the things that I want to do.
Yeah, right on, man. Right on. I would say one of my, it's a very similar, idea or book rather, that I've read so many times over was The Alchemist, which is such a great book. Definitely
Mm.
would recommend it for everybody. And it's always a toss up for me. I'm like The Alchemist or the book that I'm going to go with and mention, which I actually think you would really love. It's a tearjerker, but it's powerful, very moving. It's called The Last Lecture by Professor Randy Polsch, who was at Carnegie Mellon as a professor, and he ends up getting cancer, and he has kids, and he knows that he's not going to be around for his kids. And so he basically bakes into this last lecture all of the lessons that he would want to teach his kids that he won't be able to. And he shares this in a lecture to his college students, but really he then says at the end of the lecture, this lecture wasn't for you, it's for my kids. Very, very powerful, a lot of life lessons in there. But the reason why I bring this book up um, is because I think as investors, we get so caught up in like money, just like, oh, finances. And it's so cliche to say this, but like none of it comes with us. None of it comes with us. So today, and I'm notorious for saying this. I do personal coaching, and I help a lot of people out with depression, anxiety, addictions. One of the big things I always say is I'm a billionaire. And I say that because what true wealth really is what Randy Pausch so beautifully writes about, which is being in the moment here right now, knowing what's important. And as funny as it is, it's like me being such a big investor and all in, finances and business, at my backbone, at my core, I know it's important, which is life, living, living life and not just being on these chases. And I think that's like, if you can understand that, that helps you out with when the time comes, when the market's volatile and swinging, you're like, oh, like it's down, it's red today, or maybe you lost money, but that's not the end of the world, and you can make it back, and it just gives you that optimistic view instead of living with this. I feel like pessimism that a lot of investors carry, like, oh, the market's going to be in red. Oh, what's going to happen this year? It's like it doesn't matter. Like invest. You're doing if you're investing the right way and investing for the long term, you will be fine. Like enjoy, come back into the moment. Like you don't want to be that investor every day who's looking into their phone. Let me check my account. Let me check how much, dividends every day. Like you don't want to be that impulsive, and you want to live life. That's why we're investing in the first place, to be able to live off the dividends or live life, retire early. You can do that now. You could do that now. You could be free now. So I think that book is just like an incredible read, man. I think you would like it.
I'll add it to my reading list. I have it pulled up on Amazon right now, so I'll check it out. I have so many books to read right now. It's not even funny, which is exciting. I'm really excited to get through all of these, and I'm almost done. I have it right here. Almost done. I've got like 100 pages left in this behemoth right here, The Creature from Jekyll Island, and I'm really excited to get through with this one. It's been a great read so far, and I'm really excited to get through it and just move on to the next things.
Oh, sure, man. It's always such an accomplishment finishing a book and moving on to the next one. I get my
Speaking of which,
reading list a lot of the times recently from you, man. Yeah. I
I was
see
gonna
all these
say
books, but I see pictures.
how's the snowball been going for you? I know you've been kind of picking it back up more recently, so how's it been?
I have 100 pages left on that book. And the
Nice.
reason why I have three books that are behind my computer right now over here. The Snowball is one of them. But yeah, again, like what caught me, off guard with the Snowball is like it's more about like his Buffett's life and like his family life and like these matters that I really wasn't so interested in. Now I've been reading it, and I'm like, yeah, I could pull lessons from it, but like a lot of it, again, he's talking about like his wives or like like just things that I personally am not that interested in learning about. So it's been
Mm.
taking me a little bit. This has actually been, to be honest with you, this has been the longest it's taken me to finish a book in years because I'm just not in it. I'm like reading it to read it, but I got to finish it because I started it. So I'm like, all right, I make it a habit that every week I'm at least reading, every Saturday I try to get like 2, 3 chapters in, and then I pick up one of my other books um, that I'm flying through. So it's just like it's one of those things. But I was thrown off by the snowball.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, man. I could see how one just might not necessarily care about this stuff. And it's kind of funny, the more books you read, the quicker it is to gauge whether or not you're going to like a certain book. I remember when I first kind of got into reading, it was just, you start with the all the recommended books, you start with the must reads out there, but you don't really know if you like it or not. You're kind of reading things just cuz it's like, some books are just must read books. But the more that you read, the more you kind of get a good sense of like, I just don't know if this is my cup of tea. So with that said, though, so I think I know the answer to this already based on what you said. If you start a book, are you finishing it, or are there some like, will you let yourself, if you're pretty certain that you don't like it, will you stop it, or once you start, do you
No,
commit all
once
the
I
way through?
start, I'm gonna finish it.
Okay.
This is the Snowball has actually been the only book I in the last 5 years that I've picked up and that I really just have been struggling to get through it because I just there's elements I don't care about.
Yeah.
But I bought a book. It was an Arnold Schwarzenegger book, maybe like 6 months ago, and I didn't really learn anything from it. I didn't find it particularly interesting, but I bought it and I started reading it, and so it was like, you gotta finish it, and I finished it within a few, like 3 days. Um, but for whatever reason, this Warren Buffett book, I just like, I can't. I'm really struggling with it. I will finish it. I'm 100 pages away from being done. So I think, either this weekend or next weekend I'll be completely done. And thank God. 'Cause I
So
can really move on now from that book.
were you just hoping that it would be more related to investing in his like investing process?
Yeah, I thought it, I mean, think the title, The Snowball. I was like, oh, this is going to be about how he thinks about stocks and how he's rolling the snowball for himself. It's totally not at all about that. It is about his childhood, his years before he became the Warren Buffett that we all know. It's about how he made, network connections and he couldn't speak to people and he was nervous and he ate, only what, chicken nuggets and burgers, right? And he was going to these networking events. I'm like, I don't mention that for a half a sentence. I don't really want to read a whole chapter on him meeting somebody and going to the dinner and feeling nervous and then thinking about what everybody else is going to think about him. I mean, but again, I do always try to look for the lessons, and the lesson there was like, even Warren Buffett, as wealthy as he was in that moment, one would, I mean, I would say you're not that wealthy in that moment if you're so insecure about yourself, which is an important lesson, but I think a lesson that I could have learned in half a sentence from him, and not because it's a very repetitive lesson in that book. I think it comes up time and again and again, and I'm like, okay, I get it. He was a nervous guy, he was insecure, and money didn't help him. Just tell me that, in a couple sentences here and there, and like, let's get to his process. That's what I
Hmm.
wanted to know.
Have you read the Berkshire Hathaway shareholder letters? Have you gone through those?
I haven't. I did read the Bezos letters.
Oh,
That's an
okay.
interesting.
I want to do that too. You should check that out if you want to get more of the process. I'd highly recommend those, and they're all free online. If you just go to the Berkshire website, you can read all of his annual shareholder letters going back to, oh man, like the 70s, like early 70s, I think. Um, I've gone through up until like 1991 is the most recent one I've read, and you'll get a lot out of them. And there's another book by Robert Hagstrom, who also wrote Investing the Last Liberal Art. I think that his book is called The Warren Buffett Way, which is exactly what I think you'd be looking for, just more into his process and how he thinks about investing in stocks. But
Yeah.
I'd recommend those shareholder letters because, I mean, number one, they're free, and two, as they say, actually, your boy Bill Ackman, I think, said that they're better than getting like an MBA in business.
Oh yeah. I would say, by the way, the same on the Bezos letters. Um, I think when any, CEO or, you know, industry leader, a lot of these industry titans, when they write anything, I think it's worth, I mean, these are the individuals who are leading the charge. Their thoughts are definitely worthwhile, to really try to understand and start to think like them. In order to
Yeah,
think like them, you really have to get to know them.
yeah, 100%. And I think in doing so, you'll pick up on some common themes between the two, like between Buffett and Bezos. I think that one of the common themes between how Bezos approached Amazon and Warren Buffett approaches investing is the same things that we talk about. It's delayed gratification. Like at the start, and even to this day, like they were willing to sacrifice margins and profits to further growth of the business. And in the long run, that would only serve to benefit the business. And the same is true with Warren. He wasn't just investing to get rich quick. He was investing today for 20, 30 years down the road. And just that's just one of those timeless principles that I think you could pick up from reading about both of those guys and what they wrote.
And focus, I would argue as well. I mean,
Yeah.
Buffett talks a lot about focus. Bezos talks a lot about focus. A lot of successful individuals talk about focusing.
Hmm.
Be able to myopically focus on something for extended periods of time and just completely tune out everything else around you.
Yeah.
And I mean, as an investor, I feel like that's so important. How many stocks, how many companies are you like learning about per day? And you need to find like the handful that are the diamonds in the rough. That's
Yeah.
focus.
Well, not only that, like zooming out from that, even as that applies too as it pertains to your strategy. Like there's people who tell you that you should invest a certain way, but you have to stay true to what you are going for. We get in the comments all the time about how we should be buying this instead of that or that instead of this, but you have to you really at the end of the day have to stay focused on what you're doing and what you think is best. Those people might end up being right. Time will tell, but you have to find that out the hard way.
I was going to say, like, they might be right, but you might be right.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not
Well,
like
either
a
way, time will
one
tell.
street, like literally. The only way you're going to be wrong is if you're losing money. And if your strategy is comfortable for you and working for you and you're making money, keep going. And if
Yeah,
you want to adjust because you think you could change the strategy and make more, give it a shot. But the moment you realize that that strategy isn't working for you, you got to cut back and you know, get back to the strategy that was working for you. I think that's important. If anything I've learned in my experience investing over the years is like, just investing in ETFs was working fine for me, but I thought I could make more. And so I tried individual stocks and I did. I started making more. And then, now more recently, I mean, literally, thanks to Bill Ackman telling me to focus on, your 5, 7 tops 10 positions. I said, that sounds good to me. That makes sense. I want to try that. Now I've been trying that. I've been seeing a lot of success with that. So here I am. But if any of those strategies failed me, well, I would have gone back to the drawing boards and went back to my old strategies to fall back on them.
yeah. Well said, man. So I've got another kind of fun question for us. This is probably a good one to wrap up with. Um, but our friend Patrick Taylor, shout out Patrick, wants to know what's the Ari/Ryne origin story. How did you guys get connected and build such a great sounding relationship?
This is a nice question.
This is a fun one.
I will say, if
Let
I
me ask you
remember
this.
correctly,
Oh,
yeah,
go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
if I remember correctly, I remember. It sounds like a dating story. And I'm like, I remember when,
Yeah.
but I think did I email you or did you email me? I just remember receiving a message or something from you. I might have I don't know who reached out to who first, but we got in contact somehow. And I remember I was walking outside and that's when we like again, I don't know if I emailed you and you responded to it or you emailed me and I opened it, but I was like, oh yeah, Ryne. And he's also on YouTube. We were both much smaller creators at that point in time. Like I think like 1,000, maybe 2,000 subscribers. And I
Hmm.
remember actually reading that email and saying like, this is going to be a great, like just friendship. Like we're going to grow together and we're literally on the same path. And I think you even said there's not many dividend investors on YouTube. Like at that point in time, there just weren't as many dividend investors or channels out there. And you're like, this is kind of our runway to really help people with dividend investing. And there's just great synergy, like right off the bat. That's what I remember. Like the first few messages that were sent, and then we exchanged WhatsApps.
Yeah.
And that's when we started voice noting, which turned into like 5 or 6 minute voice notes.
Yeah, I like you said. There's just a lot of synergy here. Like we're roughly around the same age. I just think we have a very similar mindset as well. I think we think about things in a very similar way, and I think we approach life in a very similar way. And so it's a pretty natural connection. And I think we also started just doing this like kind of around the same time. And the thing about and maybe I don't know, maybe you feel the same way, Ari, but like from my perspective, just in doing this YouTube stuff, you watch a lot of YouTube videos, and in doing so, you tend to see a lot of the same individuals. And over time, like when it comes to YouTube and being a creator, not only in this space but in general, like people come and go. There's people who start channels and then for some reason or another they just stop doing it. But you take notice and you're able to see the people who push through that and keep going. And at least from my perspective, like those are the people. For me in my head, it's like, okay, I can tell that this person's in it and they're committed to doing it. And those are the type of people that you want to build rapport with, because we're at that point, we're on the same journey, we go through the same struggles, and so we all kind of we have that in common. And so it's good to have people like that who can understand what you're going through and just be sounding boards in this crazy this crazy YouTube thing. It's not really that different with investing either. It's the same idea. And so I think that we had that component as well. And yeah, generally speaking, I think we're just kind of on the same path. And yeah, it's been fun. It's been really fun. We've never met in person, but someday we'll do that.
Soon. I mean, look, I do plan to come back to the States and do a little rendezvous here and there. And there are, some people I do want to meet and see in Vegas. So that would
Nice.
be the opportunity. And even, man, to do like something, thinking like right behind you, there's a great couch and little table there. Like we do a podcast there
Yeah.
in person. The deep end in person, I think would be awesome.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to say is like you don't it's not every day that you can meet someone who can really hold you accountable, be objective, and be there for you and have the same interests as you, and you both are working towards a similar goal. And when you find those people, you have to keep them in your circle. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like if Ryne just decided tomorrow he was going to stop, YouTube, or I decided I was going to stop YouTube, it doesn't even matter. I still know that I can count on Ryne to be like, hey, here's what's going on in my life. Like, what do you think about this? And he would still give me a optimist, approach to push me to drive me to want to do better. And there are, I mean, definitely on YouTube, there are days where you're just looking at things like, opening up, right? Like you have this YouTube channel and you're trying to grow this online community. And we're always talking about, subscribers and retention, and are people liking our videos? Like, do they actually care? Are we making a difference in the world? Because this is like the real reasons of why we decided to start YouTube. Like the real reason I started YouTube and then Ryne started YouTube is to genuinely help people. And so when you're a creator, hitting that like button, that thumbs up button, going to Ryne's channel or my channel and actually subscribing, like those little moves that I feel like so many viewers don't understand. Like it's not that big of a deal. I'm not subscribed. Not that big of a deal. I'm not going to hit the thumbs up button. Not that big of a deal. I'm not going to comment. It's hard for me and Ryne to then gauge if what we're delivering through on for all of you is actually making the difference, because Ryne and I are driven off of making the difference. We want to help. And so sometimes like, I'll go to Ryne, or Ryne will come to me and be like, man, like I like going through this like emotional battle right now, because like I don't know if what I'm doing is actually helping. I don't know if what I'm doing is delivering the value that I feel I need to be delivering to continue on this journey. And then at the end of the day, we always wrap back to like, oh, no, 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 like one view, like it's all good, keep going. But it just goes to show like you need people in your life. I call it an accountability partner, or a mentor. Like you need people in your life. life is a team sport, and you got to get the right team in place to win. And you can hang around, just speak frankly, you can hang around with losers, people who want to party all day, all night, drink, get high, whatever, and just not do anything. Or you can find your Rynes of the world, like who they're also on a mission. They have goals. They're ambitious. Like Ryne and I just talked about our favorite books, reading. We're constantly reading. We're constantly growing, using each other. And I just say my hope for everybody out there, specifically with Patrick's question, is like find yourself an accountability partner, because that will make all the difference on your journey. And I was just lucky enough, Ryne, we were lucky enough to find each other growing on YouTube at the same time. And it's made all the difference. Like that, it also just keeps us around.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I can say too, just beyond Ari and myself, all of the people, all the other creators I've been able to interact with, everyone's super cool. Everyone's very nice. None of the people that I've interacted with, the creators, I felt like have ever had like a hidden agenda. They're just genuinely good people who, kind of like Ari said, wanted to do this. Like at the end of the day, we're all just trying to figure this thing out, this investing thing and this life thing, the best way we know how, and put it out there to share our thoughts, and hopefully that's helpful to someone. All the creators that I've come across, they're the same way in that. And there's just, from my experience, there's a lot of good people in this space, and everyone's just trying to do the right thing and make a positive difference. And it's good to see. Overall, generally speaking, I mean, even you guys in the comments, I feel like this is a very tight-knit group of people who all just want to see each other win. And the cool thing is, like, we don't have to step on each other's toes to do so.
Oh, even say like with that, like, yeah, you can drop a comment, but if you're really in need of like some serious insights or help, Ryan and I both love emails, or, if you go on Instagram, we both have Instagram, like DM us, like you can send voice notes. You can actually reach out to us, and we are going to go out of our way to help. So like just more than the comments, like you can use us or you can use each other. I would just recommend like everybody in the comments, definitely people who got this far, right? Like you're
Yeah.
in this with us.
Yeah.
So you could maybe see video to video, like who's consistently commenting, try to network with each other. Like that's how, like use this network that we're building together, not just Ryne and I, all of us, to find your accountability partners and create this team. Like I'm always saying this on my channel, like let's win together. My goal might not be your goal, but like we have financial goals that we both want to achieve. Let's use each other to get there. And this, again, it's a team sport. Like Ryne and I had a crazy idea. This was not even, I think this was like last year, maybe. We wanted to do in-person events and like get everybody together. And that's not even ruled out, by the way. So, stay
Right.
tuned. But maybe when I come to Vegas, we could do like an in-person event and like all get together and just have this crazy power hour, if you will, of like talking investing, really amping each other up to move forward. And we need each other. So, don't be a stranger. That's really what I'm trying to say.
I think that'd be fun, man. If you ever make it out to Vegas, like we plan it far enough in advance to where we could try and plan like an in-person type mixer event where we can all just get together and connect and hang out.
Look,
That'd be
if
fun.
there's interest, I'll say this. This might be interesting. We
Okay.
can all pitch in, I don't know, X amount of money, and we can all, rent out maybe a conference, room or some club or whatever, like a nice club in Vegas,
I
and
know a
like
great
take
place we could do
note
it.
of investors.
I know a great place we could do it. So, yeah, I know a great place we could
There we
do it,
go.
actually.
All we need is the interest. Now, if there's heavy interest, I mean, I'll be there in a heartbeat. I'll fly tomorrow. Like again, I'm there to help. So we just make it happen.
Yeah. Well, man, I think this is a pretty good place to wrap it up, unless you have any last thoughts.
No, that's it. Just stay close. Everybody stay close. And I'll just wrap up by saying, thank you again for really joining Ryan and I on this journey. It's like video to video. Ryan and I are excited to see all the comments. Keep them coming. Keep the comments coming. Let us know how we're doing. And thank you. That's it. That's all I got.